Ever wondered if diffusion models could think a little more independently? Well, hold on to your hidden layers, because today we're talking about dispersive loss, a spicy new trick that makes your model's internal representation scatter like confetti in hidden space. Instead of forcing pairs to hug it out like in contrastive learning, this method skips the awkward introductions. No positive pairs, no extra views, no pre-training, nada. Just a simple regularizer that tells your network, hey, go be different. The result? Cleaner images, faster training, and a plug-and-play bonus for any diffusion setup. Let's dive in and unpack how this self-contained loss is bridging the gap between representation learning and generative modeling.
Let's kick things off by looking at the problem this paper is tackling. Diffusion models have become state-of-the-art for generating images. But there's a catch. They don't really take advantage of the progress we've made in representation learning. These models are usually trained with a regression loss. Basically, the model learns to reverse the noise process and reconstruct clean images. But there's no guidance on what kind of internal representations the model should learn along the way. That's in sharp contrast to image recognition, where learning good internal features has been a central goal for years. Think about self-supervised learning methods like contrastive learning, which train models by pulling together similar pairs and pushing apart different ones. They've made huge strides in visual understanding. But here's the twist. These contrastive methods haven't really made their way into generative modeling. There's one attempt that tried to bridge this gap. REPA, short for representation alignment. It aligns the internal features of a generative model with those from a powerful pre-trained network. But that comes at a cost. It needs a big pre-trained model, extra parameters, and access to external data. It's not lightweight or flexible. This paper proposes something much simpler. They introduce a new regularization loss that encourages the internal features of a diffusion model to spread out, to disperse in the hidden space, without needing any positive pairs, extra views, or augmentation tricks. And it works without touching the sampling process. So the idea is to add a regularizer, keep the model's generation pipeline unchanged, and still improve performance. So how does this actually work? Let's unpack the core idea behind dispersive loss. Picture a standard diffusion model, like SIT or DIT. Normally, you train it to denoise images step by step using a regression loss. But what's happening inside the model, specifically in the hidden layers? That's where things get interesting. The authors propose a simple twist. They add a regularizer that pushes the hidden representations apart from one another, kind of like people trying to keep their personal space in a crowded room. This prevents them from all collapsing into the same spots. Importantly, this happens inside just one block of the model. You're not touching the input or output at all. Take a look at Figure 1. On the left, you've got the usual stack of model blocks trained on noisy images. Now notice one of those middle blocks. That's where the dispersive loss kicks in. And on the right, you see what it's doing. The hidden features, represented by red arrows, are spreading away from each other instead of clustering. The beauty of this? You don't need any positive pairs, no fancy augmentations, no extra networks. The model still learns to denoise images using the usual loss, but you just add this extra term to push the internal representations apart. And it pays off. The authors show that adding dispersive loss improves performance across models, datasets, and training setups, even in single-step generation setups like mean-flow. So you get better results simply by tweaking what's happening inside the model, not the sampling itself. Now let's look at how this plays out over time. Check out Figure 2. It shows how the model's FID50K score, a common metric for image quality where lower is better, improves over training. The blue line is the baseline model, and the darker line is with dispersive loss. You can see the gaps start to open around 200 epochs and continue to widen, with the dispersive model finishing stronger by the end. After that, the paper pivots back to self-supervised learning. You've probably heard of contrastive learning. It's the idea of pulling similar pairs together and pushing dissimilar ones apart. It's made a lot of progress in visual understanding. But there's also a new twist on this. Negative-free contrastive learning. Instead of handpicking which samples to push apart, it just avoids collapse without defining negatives. This paper goes a step further. It introduces what they call a positive-free approach. No matching of sample pairs at all. That makes it super simple to use and integrate. They also zoom out to show how representation learning can be layered on top of other tasks. In some models, people use auxiliary losses, like supervised contrastive learning or SLIP, to improve representations while doing something else. REPA does this too, but again, it requires a pre-trained network and heavy computation. By contrast, dispersive loss just works on the model's own features. No external data, no extra machinery. It's minimal and self-contained. Now we're getting into the nuts and bolts. How is dispersive loss actually defined? Let's start with Table 1. You'll see three well-known contrastive loss types: info, NCE, hinge, and covariance. Each of them has a standard contrastive version, and a new dispersive version without positive pairs. The idea is simple. In a normal diffusion model, you already calculate a regression loss to denoise images. With dispersive loss, you just add a new term on top, one that encourages the internal representations in the batch to spread out. It's controlled by a hyperparameter lambda, but nothing else changes. No projection heads, no encoders, no data tricks. Zooming in, take the info NCE case. Normally, you want to pull a sample close to its positive pair and push it away from all the others. Mathematically, that's a ratio, similarity with the positive on top, and all similarities in the denominator. But here's the trick. The authors split that into two parts. One term pulls the sample toward its pair, the other pushes it away from the rest. Then they just throw out the first part. So now you've got a loss that only does the pushing, and it still works. In other words, dispersive loss keeps only the part that spreads things out, and by doing that, it helps avoid feature collapse without needing hand-picked matches. Let's go a bit deeper into the math. We just talked about splitting info NCE into two parts, the attractive and repulsive terms. Dispersive loss drops the attractive part and keeps the repulsion. What that looks like in practice is a log sum express over all the distances between features in a batch. You scale it by a temperature value to control sensitivity. And that's it. Here's a handy simplification. You don't need to exclude the self-comparisons. If you're using L2 distance, comparing a sample to itself just gives you 0. If it's cosine distance, you get -1. Either way, those terms don't affect much, and they actually simplify implementation. Interestingly, this setup ends up really close to something called the uniformity loss, used before in contrastive learning, except that was always tied to a pull-together term. Here, they cut that part loose and still get good results. And it generalizes. For hinge loss, they drop the positive term and just keep the margin-based repulsion. For covariance-based losses like Barlow twins, they drop the identity constraint and penalize just the off-diagonal correlations, which encourages the features to become decorrelated. Across all three versions, the core move is the same. Stop pulling features together and just focus on pushing them apart. So how do you actually implement this in code? The paper lays it out with two small algorithms. Look at algorithm 1. It defines the dispersive loss using L2 distance. You take your batch of intermediate features, compute all pairwise distances, square them, divide by the temperature, and run a log sum express. That gives you one scalar value representing how close everything is. And you want that value to be low. Now check algorithm 2. This is where the loss gets used during training. You compute your usual diffusion loss, the mean squared error between the model's prediction and the denoised target, and then add the dispersive loss to it. A lambda parameter lets you control how much weight it gets. And that's it. No architecture changes needed. The rest of this section compares the approach with contrastive methods. Here's the problem with contrastive learning. You need two views of every sample. That doubles your data processing and introduces noise. If the noise is independent, it actually hurts performance. If it's restricted, the gains are still modest. Dispersive loss sidesteps all of that. It doesn't care about paired views or data augmentations. You work with a single view and focus on spreading out features. And that's enough to beat the contrastive baselines. This section dives into the details of where and how to apply dispersive loss. Let's start by revisiting Table 2. It compares different versions of the loss: contrastive, with both independent and restricted noise, and dispersive. The clear winner? Dispersive loss, especially when combined with L2 distance. It cuts the FID score by more than 11%. Then the authors ask, where in the model should we apply this loss? Table 3 explores that by testing each transformer block individually. Turns out, it helps almost everywhere. Block 3 gives the best result. But here's the cool part. If you apply it across all blocks, the improvement gets even better, from 36.49 down to 32.05. They also tune hyperparameters. Table 4 shows experiments with different loss weights and temperatures. Surprisingly, the model is pretty robust. All configurations beat the baseline, and small tweaks in temperature don't hurt. Unlike contrastive learning, where getting the temperature wrong can tank performance. Now take a look at Figure 3. It shows how the norm of internal features evolves during training when dispersive loss is applied only at block 3. You'll see the norm goes up not just at block 3, but in later layers too. That means the effect spreads, encouraging more expressive features across the entire network. Let's zoom out and look at how dispersive loss performs across different model sizes. Figure 4 compares DIT and SIT architectures at small, base, and large scales. The trend is consistent. Add dispersive loss, and the FID score drops. SIT ELS2 gets the biggest boost, a 21% improvement. Next, check out Table 5. It focuses on the largest model, SIT XL2, and extends training up to 1200 plus epochs. They compare models trained with and without classifier-free guidance. No matter what the setting, adding dispersive loss improves FINLD. Even in long training runs, the gains hold. Now look at Table 6. It compares this method to REPA. REPA needs a pre-trained DynOV2 encoder, 1.1 billion parameters, and 142 million external images. In contrast, dispersive loss needs none of that. It's self-contained. No pre-training, no extra data, no additional parameters. Yet it still beats REPA in some cases. And here's an interesting insight. Larger models see bigger benefits. That's probably because they're more prone to overfitting. And dispersive loss acts as a form of regularization. So the bigger the model, the more it gains from this lightweight strategy. To wrap things up, the paper shows that dispersive loss also works for one-step generation models. Figure 5 gives us some visual samples generated by SIT XLs2 trained with the loss. While qualitative, the images look clean and coherent. Good enough to suggest the method helps. Then there's Table 7. On the left, it shows performance on mean flow models of different sizes and training lengths. Dispersive loss consistently lowers the FID score, sometimes by as much as 8%. On the right, the authors compare against other top one-step models. MeanFlow-XL2 alone gets a FID of 3.43. Add dispersive loss, it drops to 3.21, a new state-of-the-art for one-step image generation. Finally, the authors close by comparing their method again with REPA. REPA aligns features with external networks. Dispersive loss just works inside the model itself. No pre-training, no external data. That makes it more practical, especially for large-scale setups. Their takeaway is this. Dispersive loss enhances diffusion models by regularizing the internal features. It's lightweight, it doesn't interfere with the sampling strategy, and it generalizes well, even to fast one-step methods. And because it's self-contained, it scales smoothly with model size and training time. Thanks for joining us today. Happy exploring!